Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's a special episode bringing you reaction to the news of the ban of Sandro Tonali from football for 10 months. That's right, the Italian midfielder's ban has been confirmed after he admitted illegal betting offences while playing in Italy. The Italian Football Federation has confirmed the ban, and Tonali will not be allowed to play competitively for either Newcastle or Italy until August 2024. The length of the ban means Tonali will miss out on Euro 2024 should Italy qualify. I imagine Musgrove joined by Aaron Stokes. It's the news, Aaron, that we expected to come. There was always a bit of debate about how long the ban could be. You know, it could have been a lot worse. 3 years was touted had Tonali not been so open and honest about his addiction and what went on. Before I get your view on it, we'll read the statement from the Italian Football Federation President Gabriele Gravina, who told Sky Sport Italia that an agreement has been reached between the federal prosecutor and Sandro Tonali. The plea agreement is for 18 months, of which 8 months is rehabilitation, which involves therapeutic activity and making at least 16 public appearances. The rules can call for a certain number of years of suspension, but the plea bargain and circumstances have been taken into consideration, and the players' collaboration went above and beyond. Therefore, we must continue to respect the rules we have established for ourselves. Now, 10 months, as we said, it could have been a lot worse. What is your initial reaction to the news?
My initial reaction is that obviously for the player, obviously for Newcastle United, it's a huge blow. Not what they expected when they spent £55 million on him in the summer. However, from my personal point of view, I think it's very, very lenient. When it came out last week that we'd heard that Sandro Tonali had been betting on matches that he was playing in, I was thinking, okay, we're now potentially in the territory of a 3-year ban, which would mean what? Probably his contract being ripped up at Newcastle United. So look, I think it's lenient. I think 10 months with 8 months further rehabilitation is quite a result for Newcastle United. I know they won't see it like that. I'm sure a lot of fans are probably saying it's not, but I think given on what he's been accused of betting on and, you know, how bad it could have been, personally, I think, you know, Newcastle and Tonali have maybe got away with one a little bit.
Now, there's lots of questions about the punishment being handed down. Will these public appearances be able to be held in England? Will he have to go back to Italy to do them? We suspect public appearances means probably going into schools and colleges or football academies and just explaining the pitfalls of gambling, really.
Yeah, I think a lot of those are going to be held in Italy, given that it's the Italian Federation that's given out the ban. But as you say, it will mean going into schools and colleges and stuff like that. It's also obviously going to mean that he has to, you know, seek treatment for the addiction, which he's already started. You know, one thing I think we can be very clear about is that this ban would not be 10 months if he hadn't, one, agreed to that, two, cooperated fully, as Gravina, the Italian FA chief, said. He's gone above and beyond so far. And I think more players will follow suit. I mean, there's talk in Italy that around 40 current and former Serie A players are going to be implicated in this. A few wrongly implicated, as it seems, over the weekend. But this looks like it could be an epidemic, and I think we're going to see a lot of bans handed out. But a lot of people now cooperating. As Tonali's done, he's held his hands up and said, look, I've got an addiction, I'll seek help. And as Eddie Howe said, the hardest part is probably ahead, but it's good that, you know, he's got ahead of it and now he can look forward.
Yeah, this is obviously for many people who face these kind of addictions, it's probably the first step towards getting that actual help. So, as you say, he's been open and honest about what he's done. He obviously wants to seek help. I'm just wondering, I mean, it's going to be difficult for him because he's not playing football for 10 months. Do you think he'll remain on Tyneside, or do you think he'll go back to Italy to seek the help?
No, I think it'll be on Tyneside. I think one thing that's a huge positive for Newcastle United, and it's something that, again, adds to my argument that the ban is extremely lenient, is the fact that he's probably going to be allowed to train with Newcastle United. Something that wasn't allowed with Ivan Toney's ban for the first 4 months of his 8-month suspension. I mean, that is huge. I mean, yes, Sandro Tonali's got a very, very difficult battle ahead of him overcoming this illness, but also, you know, that would be, you know, made extremely harder if he wasn't allowed to train or be around the training site or with his players. You've seen the support that the fans have given. You've seen the support that Eddie Howe and the players have given him in recent days. The fact that he's going to be in and around that environment, I think, is a huge benefit for him and the club. And I wrote about this earlier, and when Alexander Isak got injured when he first came to the club, something really struck me with what Eddie Howe said. Alexander Isak's facing 4 months out, big record signing, big blow for Newcastle. And Eddie Howe said, well, you know what, actually, let's take the positives from it. It means he can get up to speed with his teammates, he can get it, up to date with the culture, and he can settle in properly. And look, I'm not saying, it's a positive that Sandro Tonali's been banned, but if you want to find any glimpse of it, he's going to have a full season now, behind the scenes, no pressure, to get up to speed with his teammates, to fully integrate with British culture. It must have been a huge change from over the summer. And I think that's maybe one positive Eddie Howe will take. I don't know whether I'm just clutching at straws a bit there.
Well, Newcastle United legend Alan Shearer on BBC 5 Live said, in his opinion, it'll be really difficult for Tonali to remain living in England while he's banned from playing. But the fact that we think he's going to be allowed to train might make it a little bit easier, because I have to be honest, if you're Ivan Toney and you're watching all this play out, you're going to be mightily miffed, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And if I'm completely honest, I think if Sandro Tonali had been, under investigation in England, things would be very different. I mean, this Italy, who have got such hardline, strict rules on gambling, and especially gambling in football, seem to, essentially write off most of the sentence as long as you cooperate. Now, I mean, there was talk 2 weeks ago when this first started rumbling that Sandro Tonali was going to be banned for 3 years. All of a sudden, we're now seeing 10 months. Nicolo Fagioli from Juventus has managed to get his down to 7 months. The likes of Ivan Toney and Harry Toffolo, who have been, penalised for these gambling crimes in the UK, must be thinking, I wish those Italian rules had been in place with the English FA.
Because we mentioned on the podcast on Monday, I still can't get my head around what good it does banning the player from training. Now, as we see, we understand Tonali will be allowed to train and play in friendlies. And again, that reframes your point that it's quite a lenient ban in that sense. Because if he wasn't allowed to train and he wasn't allowed to play in the friendlies, you're leaving him with absolutely nothing. So in a way, you kind of how are you filling that void of the gambling addiction if you're taking away the other thing that kind of he was doing day in, day out? So it is excellent news. Just in terms of the support from Newcastle United, what do you think they will do next? They've learnt the ban. They've obviously had the arm of support around him. But what happens next for Newcastle United?
Look, I think we've seen in recent days, I spoke about it on the podcast on Monday, but that we did. I thought Eddie Howe spoke very, very well on this topic. In the last couple of weeks, I think the support that he showed against Crystal Palace, he's thrown Sandro Tonali in the last 2 games, even though, other managers might have kept them out the spotlight. I think you only have to look at the likes of Kieran Trippier and what all the players and coaching staff did during that game against Palace to show that he's in really good hands. Very, very good if he manages to stay in that environment rather than, as you say, going back to Italy with no job essentially to go to. They've just, hired a brand new head of psychology behind the scenes. Is that just coincidental, the timing, or, have they brought that in for Sandro Tonali? I mean, I can't remember the guy's name that they brought in, but he's worked with England, he's worked with Wales, he's got a lot of experience. A lot of key England players trust him. He will, be a very, very good helping hand for Sandro Tonali. And I think it just goes back to what Eddie Howe said at the weekend. That support that he got last night and against Crystal Palace will do him the world of good. He knows that when he comes back, he's got a huge part to play. He'll only be 24 when he comes back. It's not the end of the world. But I think he's in good hands at Newcastle.
How easy do you think it will be for him, though, to focus on the task in hand, i.e. training to such a high level as if you were going to start on the Saturday, but actually, you can't? Because I don't know if I'd struggle with that. I mean, I'd welcome the fact I'll be able to train, but what's the end game?
Does he have a little, not a point to prove, does he have does he need to sort of repay that faith that Eddie Howe and the players have shown in him, by making sure he isn't slacking off? I'm sure he won't, by the way. The characters that you've got in that dressing room will, they won't allow it anyway. The likes of Jamal Lascelles and Kieran Trippier, if he does start to step a line. And I think when, what struck me was when we spoke to him in the San Siro, albeit we were listening to his answers in Italian and getting them translated, but he spoke very, very well for a 23-year-old. He looks like he's got a very good head on his shoulders. Yes, he's made a huge mistake, but as I said earlier, it's an illness, and it's like telling an alcoholic not to drink. It's like telling a drug addict not to take a drug. It's a lot more complex than people just having to wanting a bet and being able to stop at will. It's not that simple. So look, it's going to be a very, very difficult year for him, personally, but he's taken the right steps. I think having his mind clear of the addiction as well is going to be a huge help. I mean, that must have been weighing him down, especially when he started to know that things were probably falling in. When he starts hearing about other players getting investigated, it must have taken its toll on him.
Do you think the fact that he won't be playing competitive football week in, week out maybe aid the fight against his addiction?
Yeah, potentially. I think taking him out of that environment where you maybe have the triggers. Look, I can't really speak for it because I don't know what's going on in his head, and I don't know why he was gambling. He's already been seeing a therapist in Italy, which is a very good start. As I've just mentioned, Newcastle have now got a very good, group of backroom staff who can help with the sort of personal side of the game. And look, it'll be very, very hard for him. You're taking a footballer out of his job for a year. It's going to be massively hard, but it needs to be done, and he needs to be punished, and he'll take it and he'll learn from it.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, he does need to serve the punishment because he broke the rules he was well aware of. With the fact he can train, he can keep himself fit, and then he can hit the ground running when this ban is done and dusted. Does it change Newcastle's priority for January, do you think? Now, listeners to the podcast know that number 6 is always been top of my list, regardless, along with that third striker. But that's another subject for
another episode I think.
Later in the week. And now there's plenty to talk about having to bring in a replacement. Calvin Phillips is the man linked consistently. Does it now become a priority to fill Sandro Tonali's position?
Yeah, I think absolutely it does. I think you look at that midfield now. Look, Joe Willock coming back is huge, but I think even Eddie Howe admitted last night he's probably thrown him in a lot sooner than he would have wanted to. Elliot Anderson now out. Louis Miley, is he going to play week in, week out? I think they do need. I mean, you've been banging the drum for a 6. This surely for you now increases the need to not find only a 6, but maybe an 8 to come in. So what I will say is though that's going to be very tricky because. If you're bringing someone in purely with the aim of replacing Tonali temporarily, you've got to find a player that wants to come. You've got to find a team that are probably going to have to do a loan deal. There's got to be a lot of factors that fall into place.
Well, listeners and viewers, sit down because you might be surprised at my next sentence. I would go for Calvin Phillips in this instance because I think you could get him on loan and not worry about having to pay a fee in the summer. Maybe you could put it in, but it's not something that has to happen in the summer. Bring him in, and he could fill a gap, fill a space, and then you don't have to worry about him being here permanently. Come next season, you're right. It is going to be difficult to sell because that you have a £55 million player waiting to come back in August. You have, as you've mentioned there, Lewis Miley potentially stepping up, Elliot Anderson just getting better every day. Joe Linton, Bruno Longstaff, are on form. Joe Willock as well, coming back to the fold. So it is going to be difficult to persuade someone to come to Newcastle United. But then I guess, what's to say it can't be someone who can disrupt the entire midfield and say, actually, I'm not just replacing Sandro Tonali. I'm in there to replace whether it be Bruno Longstaff or Joe Linton. I'm not here just to make up the numbers.
Well, I mean, fans and yourself have been calling for a 6, to do that anyway. They think that someone needs to come in and instantly walk in that team. I maybe don't subscribe to that as much as I did in the summer. I think, it's noticeable that talk has gone a little bit quiet since Newcastle have started winning again and Bruno's performing. But again, that's maybe for another episode. But I just think the need for a midfielder, whether it's a 6 or an 8, is certainly increased. And I think, from a selfish point of view, it's probably good that this has happened now at the end of October because Newcastle United have got 2 months before the January window opens. Eddie Howe was quizzed on it on Saturday and said, it's far too early to be looking at January. Come on, Eddie. They're definitely looking at January behind the scenes and saying, right, we need to get someone in. We need to get it done ASAP.
They would be looking at January the moment the summer window closed. But I mean, from that point of view, yes, it's a good thing it's happened now because it gives you time to plan. But also, it's a horrible time for it to happen because suddenly Newcastle's squad depth is now being tested with injuries they picked up in the Champions League against Borussia Dortmund. Joe Linton obviously has just come back, but you're missing Sandro Tonali with especially with Anderson's back injury now, Lewis Miley picking up an illness as well. Suddenly the numbers in the centre of the park don't look as good as they were this time last month.
No, they absolutely don't. And as I said, I think Eddie Howe would have probably liked the luxury to maybe ease Joe Willock back into the first team a little bit.
But he didn't have the option.
He didn't have the option last night, exactly. And I think we probably wouldn't have seen Joe Willock last night if Anderson had been fit. I don't think there's any sort of secret around that. So yeah, absolutely. But look, it's probably for another episode, but you've just got to look at the attack now. And I don't want to bring up that old debate that we keep having about the third choice striker. But, with Jacob Murphy and Harvey Barnes and Alexander Isak and Elliot Anderson all out, it isn't just the midfield looking. So, 5 games to come for the international break, 4 of those away, 2 of them in different cups, 1 of them in Europe. So going to be a really testing period.
There's going to be some tired players. I just want to read a couple of quotes from the Big Step campaign to end all gambling, advertising and sponsorship in football, part of the Gambling with Lives, which is a charity set up by families bereaved by gambling-related suicide. And the quotes surround the ban of Tonali, and it's a tribute, like I say, to that charity. Footballers are human, and if they are suffering from addiction, they deserve empathy and support, not lengthy bans. Every football game is wall-to-wall with gambling ads, not just across shirts, but around stadiums and related media content. Sending someone addicted to gambling in this environment is like sending an alcoholic to work in a pub. If you force young footballers to endorse addictive products, and don't be surprised if they use them. Ending all gambling, advertising and sponsorship in football, including all parts of the shirt and in every stadium, will help to prevent harm to those on and off the pitch. Now, I actually agree quite a lot with that statement, because I do question anyone's surprise when players end up down this road, and spectators, because it is everywhere. Advertising is absolutely everywhere. Now, we know there's been some work on withdrawing gambling sponsorship from the front of matchday shirts by the end of 2025, 2026, but I'm led to believe it can still be on the shirt and stuff. So it's not totally gone. It's just gone from the center of the shirt, but you're still going to have advertising boards. You're still going to have TV adverts in between the coverage. Something needs to be done, not just to protect the footballers, but also, fans and supporters as well.
Absolutely. I think, I actually spoke to the Big Step last week for a piece I did, and one of the quotes they gave me, which I thought really hit the nail on the head, was, Tonali, when he returns, will be played in a stadium surrounded by thousands of adverts for the thing that is currently destroying his life, and that is not fair. And it is. It's like, the big thing about when Ivan Toney got banned was that he'd, was the top scorer the season before in the Sky Bet Championship, and he was playing with Hollywood Bets on his, front of shirt sponsor. It is now, unavoidable in the game. And yes, the Premier League and British football are trying to take steps to, lessen the sort of how much we see. And I know adverts at halftime and whatever have been banned, but there needs to be a serious wake-up call, because how many players now are we seeing getting caught up in this? A lot more than we used to.
The cynics would say you have to show some restraint. Now, it's easy for them to say that. It's easy for us to ask this question when we've not gone down a road of addiction. But what would you say to those who say, well, okay, I watch an advert for, I don't know, a yogurt. I'm not going to go out and, buy all the yogurts off the shelf.
But I know the point, but it just isn't as simple as that. It's about little triggers, and I think it was something that we were talking about a fair few days ago, and it's like, this is just a very niche example, but if you've had a football bet on the first half and it hasn't come in at half time, you're seeing adverts will, put this on to win this, for Harry Kane to score. It's promoting a really, really, this unhealthy reliance that you can't now watch football without having a bet on it. It shouldn't be like that. But look, it's a very, very complex issue. Anybody that I would say that says, well, it's such an easy thing to stop, it really isn't. As I said, tell an alcoholic to stop having a drink, tell a drug addict to stop taking drugs. It just doesn't work like that. And I think what I will say is that I'm just pleased for Tonali personally that he's, now seeking the help. He started the rehab, and hopefully personally and mentally he's getting better. Take the football away from it. He's a very young lad in a new country, and I'm glad that he's seeking help.
We wish him all the best to get the better of this addiction. This has been the Everything is Black and White podcast, a special episode on the news of Sandro Tonali's ban from football. He will not be playing football until August 2024 after admitting illegal betting while playing in Italy. Please remember to like and subscribe to the podcast through whichever platform you're following through. And head over to chroniclelive.co.uk for all the latest Newcastle United news.